All right, so today we've got another project that's going on, and this time it is this guy right here. I got a Troy-Bilt rototiller that I purchased it arrived, well, I purchased it months ago. It's one of the bigger models. I think this one was around 1,300 bucks for this guy. It's supposed to be one where, you know, you can push it with one hand, so it's not going to really be super, you know, it's not going to fight you like some of those tillers where, you know, you stick it in the ground and it just immediately lurches forward and drags you along for the ride. This is not supposed to do this. It's rear tine instead of the front tines. The front tines are the ones that'll drag you. Maybe they've improved the design. Maybe some don't do that. All I know is that this one won't do that because it's rear tine. It's got tires in the front instead. So it's supposed to be really, really friendly. And I've watched other YouTube videos. I did my homework before I bought the thing. And I've seen, like, you know, small, petite women using the thing. So I would imagine if a small, petite woman can use it, then I get the feeling it's going to be pretty easy to control, right? So I've got high hopes for this thing because we have I don't want to say it's going to be a large garden. I mean, if we were going to do something large, then I probably would have seriously considered getting a tractor and that, you know, had a PTO and probably a couple of attachments for it. I'd have to get a couple of attachments for it for doing any kind of, like, you know, really large scale production of food. But just, you know, for my wife and I think that we'll be fine with having the size garden that I'm planning on putting out. This will help a lot with trying to, like, break up at least, you know, a few good, like, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches or so worth of the topsoil. And, you know, then you could shovel that out of the way, and I'm sure you could probably go back in there with this just if you need to get down a little bit deep. It's going to have limitations, but I mean, you know, I can kind of like make this thing work for numerous things. So I figured today what I'll wind up doing is let's get this thing together and we'll get it up and running and kind of just do a little bit of a test, because one of the other projects that I have that I'll be working on is I'm going to be installing a dry creek bed in the backyard to kind of divert some of that water, to kind of guide it down this natural channel that is in our backyard. And this, I think, is going to help with that, because I have to dig a trench for that dry creek bed, because there's just a vague kind of path, and this is going to help me to really define that path. So without further ado, and as usual, we got jets flying constantly overhead, so it'll be a bit of a challenge to kind of narrate as I go along, but you have to just bear with me. All right, let's get this thing out of the box and start putting it together. All right, cool.
It took a lot longer to get it assembled than I thought it would, mainly because the engine manual doesn't show the same model I have. There's several fill stations on the engine, and I wasn't sure which was for oil and which was potentially transmission fluid. Getting that mixed up would be catastrophic, so I pored over the manual trying to find some way of figuring out which is which, and I eventually unraveled that mystery. It also took numerous pulls to get it started. I checked to make sure the choke was on, the kill switch wasn't engaged. What I didn't do was read the manual. There's a run speed on the engine, and it was set all the way in the turtle position, which means there's no fuel being delivered at all. After I read the instructions and put the speed or the run speed on rabbit, don't you love these silly ways of indicating speed? It fired up right away. And I want to note that it starts with a single pull almost every single time, so the slow start was 100% my fault. And the tiller does its job extremely well. The results I was getting were extremely pleasing, and it also sips on gas, so you don't have to worry about running out of fuel after a few hours of use. And it's easy to move it from spot to spot, and the fact that you can engage the tires with the engine to assist in driving it is great. Most of the controls are right where you need them, at the handles. So the issues I have with it. The claims of it being a one-handed operation are greatly exaggerated. If you have hard-packed dirt and rocks lurking beneath the surface, no matter what run speed you're on, it's going to lurch forward violently. I've had it shoot out of my grip on occasion when it's hit underground rocks. Once you've picked up all the rocks out and broken the ground a bit, that's when you're able to operate it with just a single hand. Not all of the controls are at the handle. I would love it if there was a way to engage and disengage the tires from the operator's position. And the same thing goes for the engine speed. Anytime you need to engage or disengage the tires or change the speed, you're going to have to stop what you're doing and walk around to the engine. Lastly, and the biggest gripe, is the rear cover broke on the very first day. When you're backing up, all the material accumulates on that rear cover, and the force of the material up against it, it's too much for these weak stamped connections they decided to go with. And almost all those stamped connections wound up popping out. I'm sure if I hadn't been proactive with a fix, the rest of them would have popped and I would have ran over the rear cover. What I wound up doing was drilling out all those stamped connection points and replaced them all with bolts and nylon nuts with Loctite applied. I've had zero issues after this fix. But honestly, for the amount of money that you spend on this thing, you shouldn't have to do this. I don't understand why they went with those weird stamped connection points, because that is by far the weakest thing on the tiller. All right, so that's kind of the summary of the Troy-Bilt Pony that I purchased. And one of the things that I did forget to mention when we were rolling through the time-lapse footage was the fact that this thing right here, this thing sucks. It is terrible. It's the height adjustment for the handlebars, and it just uses this like chintzy like turning knob that doesn't really lock in place. Because you got to bear in mind, you know, when you're using this thing, it vibrates like crazy. It shakes like mad, and it'll just shake that knob loose. So what winds up happening is that you really have got to grab like a pair of pliers and just crank on that thing to hold it in place. And even then, it'll still kind of shake loose. So if you like having the handlebars up in a higher position, and I do, what winds up happening is it just shakes loose, and then it'll drop down, and then the handlebars just get loose. And then the thing that also sucks is that there's nothing that retains that in place. So if you're not paying attention, and you do have it on the low position, and the thing is shaking like crazy, as it, you know, does when you're tilling up soil, that's going to shake loose, probably fall out, and then you're going to run over it. And if you even see it, it's going to be a bit late, because then you're going to have it just completely destroyed. So that is one thing also that I just really don't like about that at all. And I had mentioned about how, you know, the little like compression fittings or whatever they did, there's like these stamped, let me just zoom in here so that way you can kind of see what I'm talking about here, and hopefully I don't tap anything on here. So here's what I had to wind up going ahead and putting in place of these little, see these little divots? All it was is just they just kind of stamped this on. So there's a hinge, and what they've done is just stamped the hinge in place. And these little things, I mean, come on, what are you guys thinking? That's just not gonna work. So what I wound up doing is just taking a drill bit and drilling out every single one of these holes on the plate itself. And then on the top part, I went ahead and just drilled out this one and that one on the end, because that'll be good enough. The most amount of force is put on this right here. So as I was talking about, you know, as you're pulling backwards, it really compresses down on this thing and puts a lot of pressure on it. And these just little silly things are just not good enough. It's like I said, I didn't even get through day one without those things just popping off. And luckily I didn't lose, you know, the rear plate there, because it's entirely possible that I might have wound up just completely losing that and running over it. And again, along with that silly knob that they got there, both of those things could have wound up with disastrous consequences, where, you know, I would have had to order a new part. And I'm fairly certain, based on the fact that, you know, this rear cover is pressed into place with the hinge, you probably can't just get this cover. You probably have to get this whole assembly. And I gotta imagine, you know, trying to, for one thing, having to wait for the parts and everything else, what a pain, you know. That's just a really bad design. And if you get one of these, this is probably one of the things that you're going to wind up having to do, unless you're just like have super soft soil and whenever you back up, if you hold it up while you're backing up, then you'll probably avoid that. But if you're trying to get some of that dirt out of the way as you're tilling, it's going to just hit against the back of that, put too much pressure on it, and it's going to pop off. And so watch out for that. That might be one of those things that if you buy one of these guys, You're gonna have to do that right off the bat. But other than that, everything is, it works really, really well. One thing that I was talking about was how I wasn't sure where the oil fill was, and this is the oil fill. And there actually might be two oil fills, because this is like over, you can see there's a fill spot there, and then there's another one that's over here. And so this is why it was really confusing when I was trying to figure out where to put the oil, because it didn't really mention, you know, on the instructions for the engine where to put the oil, because there's another spot right here that looks like, well, I mean, you definitely put something in here, but I believe that this is the transmission, and that's probably where the transmission fluid goes. Not only that, but this is kind of one of those safety sort of things, so like they're actually sloped right here, so you can't get a grip to undo it. So I suspect that that's just a factory thing, or maybe when they're servicing it, if you have to take it in, then that's how they are able to add additional transmission fluid. They probably have a special tool that they use to unthread that thing to pop it off. But yeah, this is where the actual oil goes. I'm sure if I popped off the other side, I'd probably see oil on that side too, because that just would make sense to me. So anyways, that's where the oil goes, and that's where the oil, if you need to change your oil and dump it, that's where you would undo that bolt right there, and that'll dump the oil out. All right, so that's enough flapping my gums for now, because you know me, I like flapping my gums. Appreciate you guys watching this video, and if you find it useful, I'd appreciate it if you give a thumbs up. And I have lots more projects as usual going on around here, and lots more gear to go over. So this is just going to be an ongoing thing where I have just so many projects to kind of show as I'm working through them. I got new equipment. I'm not going to say what it is, but it'll be another video that I'll be making sometime in the near future. So stand by, and I will see you guys next time. And I hope you have a great day. Take care.